Buckle up, ladies and gents, because we got lots to cover today. Now, I'm going to start you over here with these two dash bezels. Now, for those of you that know your Foxbodies and or have on your bingo card at home that this one is out of an 87 through 89 and this one is out of a 90 through 93, you would be correct. Now, there are some subtle differences between these two dash bezels. The one that people know the most about is this area right here, better known as the idiot lights. Low fuel, check oil, stuff like that. And you can see this one's been removed. I have been somewhat busy with my soldering iron removing this, but more on that in a minute. So that is the biggest one. Now there are some other subtle differences, i.e. column area. There's some differences in how the plastic is in here and whatever. And again, more on that in a minute. Now, why I have removed the idiot lights is because this little beauty is going to now live in behind here. If I could put it in the correct way, like so. So, my good buddy, Mark Koranic, better known as Fox on Instagram, you can also find him on Facebook. He and I have been chatting because he has done this in his car, and I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea for an OEM plus way of mounting gauges. Now, this is just the mount, which is an amazing piece, and I can't even imagine how many hours he has tied up into it. But where the magic really happens is over here. So the folks at Zada Tech make these tiny little 1.3 inch gauge digital screens, okay? And you can reach out to them and tell them that you want to monitor pretty much anything that your car is capable of monitoring and then some. I'm talking air ride, AFR, boost, oil pressure, you name it, okay? They will program these little boxes to whatever it is that you want to monitor in your car. So here you can see I've got 3 of the little 1.3 inch screens. They're going to live in Mark's little gauge mount here. I got a whole bunch of tiny little set screws that he was kind enough to send me. So I'm going to mount those in there. And what we're going to be monitoring is AFR, left bank, right bank, fuel pressure, oil pressure, water temp, and intake air temp. Okay. And now this is the, I guess, the less sexy side of the thing. This is all the sensors, right, that we're going to need to monitor these things. Plus, I have this kit from Z-Tronics. This is going to be my dual wideband AFR system. Okay. So we're going to be doing some heavy duty monitoring because this is somewhat part and parcel with a whole bunch of data logging that I want to do on this car to work out some of the bugs that I've been talking about in my previous videos. Now, because we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole by removing the dash and kind of doing all this work with the bezel, I thought, you know what? Maybe it's time that I go with LMR's digital gauge cluster because I'm actually having some speedometer troubles. Again, I've kind of mentioned this in some of my other videos, but the Kenny bell that I installed on my 302 creates a real tight corner where the speedometer cable comes through the firewall, and it's pretty much just given up on me. It's we don't want to track your speed anymore or your miles. So anyway, we're going to do away with that cable and actually gain some real estate in the firewall by getting rid of it to run all of this new digital wiring and gadgetry. We're going to run it through the firewall and tie it into this gauge cluster. So some of the interesting part with this is oil pressure and coolant temp do turn into digital gauge signals with this gauge cluster. So I'm actually going to be technically monitoring them in 2 areas, on the gauge cluster and on the Zada Tech 1.3 inch gauge screens. But that's okay. We kind of want to pay attention to those parameters. So again, I have kind of, well, done a little mock-up because I wanted to make sure I knew what I was talking about before I started talking to you guys and telling you how to do all this. But I had peeled out some of my interior, including my dash bezel, to make sure that all of this stuff was going to fit. Now, some of the things that I have found out thus far is we have to do some trimming on this column area. So I mentioned earlier that the subtle differences between this bezel and a 90 through 93 bezel, well, this is one of them. you got a heck of a lot more plastic in here than you do in here. And where you run into trouble with that is when you go to put your 90 through 93 column cover in, right? So it goes that way. And that little arm there where the screw comes through bounces into this plastic piece, right? So we got to do some trimming, but fear not, because obviously we want to try to do the best trimming job we can, but a lot of this is going to be covered, right, by this bezel. You know what? No, that's right. Anyways, so I got to do a little trimming here. I do have to mount this in behind, and that's going to be a combination of glue / plastic welding. And I want to have that in there before I scuff this guy down and splash it with a little paint. A lot of people talk about this. Maybe some don't know, but you can kind of see that these bezels almost have a little bit of a gray tinge to them. I don't know if the camera will show that even with this dusty old one, but they're not as black as the 90 through 93. So good old trim blacks coming into the picture here. I'm going to scuff this guy down after I do my trimming and cutting and mounting of this, because I would like all of my blacks to match, right? Well, folks, my mistake. I filmed a little explanation there that I tried giving you prior to installing some of these momentary switches in time lapse. So I'll try my best to explain what I said before and show you the finished product of these switches. So Zada Tech has provided me with these momentary switches for each one of the gauges. And what these will do is change the parameter that I'm monitoring from one or the other or both in the gauge at the exact same time. And I've chosen to mount them essentially directly under each gauge. That's why you can see a difference in gap from here to here. I didn't screw up my holes when I was drilling. I kind of went for this method of lining up my switches to my gauge. So anyway, it was obviously easy to drill through the plastic, but where I did run into a little bit of a hiccup is where my holes were. I had like plastic reinforcement from the bezel. So I just took a X-Acto knife and chiseled some of that out of there. And then I could get my little nut on the backside, and they come with a little lock washer as well. And they're loaded up with solder, so you can solder up your connections and tie them into your gauge. Now I'll show you over on the little gauge ECU, if you will. These are almost like a little equalizer. For those of you that are familiar with stereo equipment, you know, you got all your little inputs for your wires and pretty much tells you where to put everything. So there's your push button terminals. You obviously just tie your wires into there, and your push button will change this gauge from fuel pressure to oil pressure, or both at the same time. And finally, in order to mount Mark's 3D printed gauge mount in the bezel, I'm just going to be using some good old-fashioned Gorilla Clear Grip. Run it around the outside edge of it, and then tie it all in with some clamps. Wait for the glue to dry. Okay, folks, everything is glued in place. I'm all painted, so I think we're ready for the next step, which is mounting these fancy little 1.3 inch screens. Now, here's a little closer look at the brains behind the operation. We're gonna have to find some real estate to mount these, and what I'm currently thinking is we maybe go, I don't know, up in here or something, right? Now, I'll obviously have to, you know, get my wires in place and everything, and then maybe some double-sided tape or whatever, and we'll just tuck these guys up in here. It's going to be a little bit of a tight operation, but you know, nothing runs in and along up in here, so the only harness stuff we've got is coming through here and here. So bear with me. I'm gonna mess around with this here and I'll show everybody kind of what's going on once they're in place. Right, so we're all hillbillied up here. I stole the battery out of the 79. I shredded up some speaker wire and gave these little ECUs. I don't know what Zada Tech calls this, but that's what I'm calling it, the ECU. It's the unit that makes all the magic happen to the gauge. So I wired them up with just a positive and negative to get a sense of what these gauges look like, and here's a first look. So as mentioned earlier in the video, AFR left, AFR right, water temp, intake air temp, fuel pressure, oil pressure. And then I've got my momentary switches here, which are not wired up to the ECUs yet, but for those of you old boys like me that need readers, when this button is live, what I understand it will do is when you push it, it'll cycle between just fuel pressure, just oil pressure, or give you the ability to watch both parameters. So that'll be pretty neat. And then I threw the LMR Dakota Digital cluster in there just to get a sense of what this was all going to look like. So I think it'll be pretty cool. Status update slash deep thought for you folks. So I just finished soldering up my leads onto my momentary switches. And you can see here I've got quite the bundle, right? 6 18 gauge wires. And now these wires are not necessarily a worry of mine because they are going to live in this bezel full time. They just go from the switch up to the little ECU. But it's about this time that it dawns on me that if I want this bezel to be somewhat easily removable down the road, I'm going to have some sort of a connection in here or a harness with a connector on it where I can unplug it and remove my bezel. Because you look here, so oil pressure and fuel pressure each have 3 leads. So there we got 6. Water temp, intake temp, there's 2 and 2, so now we're up to 10, and then I got AFR left and right, now we got 12, and we haven't even taken into consideration ignition power or ground for each one of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run 2 harnesses, one with the sensitive sensor style information and the other with the power and ground. So anybody that's messed around with this stuff before, you know that wires can have a tendency of telepathically communicating with one another. So I'm going to try and alleviate any of that by separating my power and ground from my sensitive information wires. So I'll have two harnesses that I'll plug in down here. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of lay this out and hopefully explain it in somewhat of a clear manner so you can kind of get an idea for yourself if you want to go down this road, what you're probably going to be in for. Now, those connectors are not showing up here for, well, about a day and a half, 2 days, let's call it. So I'm going to get after pulling my current dash cluster out of this thing and start messing around with this Dakota Digital, because I am actually going to have to remove my speedometer cable, which is where we're going to get some or gain some real estate to run all these sensor wires through the firewall and up to the cluster slash bezel slash gauges. Okay, so I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm going to be using this New Rad Solutions wiring harness, which is quite slick, right? Very, very easy to follow thus far. I can't see it really changing as I go, but I've just kind of tucked that in behind my dash, so my left-hand connector is now in behind here because I obviously need all this room for dropping in my new digital instrument cluster. But then as I was going through, I had my right hand connector plugged in and I went, you know, I remember something about the last time I did these, needing to install a load resistor for the alternator. And apparently really bad things happen if you don't have this load resistor in there. So anyway, went over to my table of parts, which I've got, you know, stuff everywhere. Anyway, found my load resistor. And it's very easy to overlook this step, but because of what I just said, you know, your car may start, may not, definitely won't stay running. You need this load resistor in place. So I pulled my right hand connector out, and I should also mention or preface all this by saying You use the right-hand connector to put this load resistor in 90 through 93 cars. 87 through 89, you're using the left-hand connector, but this is all laid out clearly in the instructions here, okay? So, pulled my right-hand connector out, pin 2 and pin 14, snip both of those guys, threw my load resistor in, and now I'm just about to load them up with some looming and try and get these things routed through my car. Now, I've got a little bit of a disadvantage from most of yous out there, and where that disadvantage comes from is, well, I guess it all depends on where you want to mount your digital box, okay? Because this whole dash operates off this brain right here, right? And you need to find somewhere to mount this guy. Well, the last one I did, I mounted behind the glove box, and I kind of like that location. There's quite a bit of room back there, even if you do have an OEM heater box. So maybe I'll link to my video, okay, up in the corner where I've already mounted one of those. You can check that one out too in case I miss anything here, but I'm thinking I'm going over there with this install as well. Well, speedo cable's out, and it's been a couple of days. I will put an edited version of a story post that I put up on Instagram showing you guys the state of mind that I was in about 30 seconds after this cable came out. Anybody that needs to change a speedo cable, actually, never mind change, how about just remove a speedo cable from a 5-liter with a Kenny bell on it? Good luck. I had to cut it out. I just spent like an hour and a half. Bolt cutters, tin snips, side cutters. The shit that I've been through to get this speedometer cable out of here would blow your mind. My life. As you can see, it's in pieces. Bolt cutters were involved, side cutters, you name it. I will, like I say, put an edited version out because I don't think any of you kind folks at home would appreciate the language that I used after I took that cable out to explain how much of a pain that it was, but it's out. Now, again, it's been a couple of days and my order has shown up from Amazon. So here are the plugs I'm using. Now, I was a little worried that this guy was going to be bulky, and it kind of is. Now, that said, I think I'll still be all right, but this is going to be the plug that I'm going to use for all of my sensitive data. This is going to be my power plug. I am going to run 3 grounds and 3 powers off of this. The draw of these little screens is not massive, so I'm going to, do a little daisy chain in here. Anyway, I'm going to get after wiring this up. This is going to be a time-consuming process to run all these wires and solder them up and everything, but I'll get back with you in a moment here, folks. I'll kind of show you what the finished product looks like. Well, ladies and gents, there's no turning back now. We are officially wired. You know, I couldn't help but think to myself while I was wiring this thing up. I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I picked up this bezel used from a fella, you know, 40 bucks, whatever it was. Lord only knows the story that this bezel could tell you from whatever car it came out of, or cars for that matter. And here I am making this thing like one of the most high-tech bezels on the face of planet Earth for a Foxbody, and I thought, I wonder if this bezel's just giggling to itself right now going, man, I could have been in the junkyard or turned into Ziploc bags, and here I am getting all this tech thrown at me. So anyway, long-winded way of saying we are wired for sound. There is a lot going on between here and here. Yeah, a lot of wires, a lot of things that, you know, technically could cause a person grief, but I triple checked everything. You can see I'm all labeled up. I've got the male side of my plug all labeled up as well, so I know where the hell everything goes when I go to wire this in. This one's pretty straightforward. Power and ground. Well, it'll be switched power, ignition power. And then I'll be able to disconnect and remove my bezel if need be. So ladies and gents, I think we're on to sensors at this point in time, but I'll give you a quick little look at this thing. Sorry, I'm kind of working one-handed here from the business side of it. Yeah, you don't know anything's really going on in behind there, right? Unless you were to pull your defrost, or if this is going in your convertible switch or hazard switch out, right? That's all you really see. That and, well, some high-tech idiot lights. So, all right, on to the sensors. Okay, ladies and gents, we're in test mode. So I did have some camera difficulties, and actually you guys didn't get to see what probably would have been very boring stuff, but me struggling to run this stuff through the firewall. This is my left and right bank AFR leads. I still have to wire up my Zetronics box, but that's not really rocket science, right? You got a accessory power, a ground, and your left and right feed over to your gauges, but I haven't even gotten into wiring the gauges that are going to be in my bezel yet. That's all coming, which is kind of the point of this video anyway. This really isn't about the Dakota Digital Dash or me wiring up the little brain for it, but I'm in test mode right now. Now, for any of you wondering what that yellow cord is, that's the Cat 5 cord that I have supplied, because LMR's cord they supplied wasn't really long. So the only cord that you get that plugs into the back of this digital dash is that Cat 5 cable. It's like an internet cable or a phone jack cable. I just had one laying around the house that was longer, and I've added that to the kit. But other than that, I've wired up my oil pressure and my coolant temp sensor. Now those are going to feed into that box first, and then they're going to come over and feed into the bezel gauges. I'm going to have a lot of ability to monitor those two pieces of information. And my other sensors have been ran through the firewall as well. Fuel pressure. Oh geez, and what's my other one? Air temp, intake air temp. They are going to be only monitored on the bezel. But anyway, that's just me rambling. Let's fire the old girl up here and give this digital dash a test. Oh, okay. So all those things are good signs. Nice. Got oil pressure, we got battery, coolant temp's obviously going to be low, and I have not set my fuel gauge yet. The fact that the tach works is a good thing though. Okay, beauty. We can go on to mounting the box. Okay, I got a real crisp dinger in this car. Well folks, there's the remnants of this wiring extravaganza I've been on. Well, one portion of it anyway. We have our harness in, okay? And now something I just wanted to point out to you is it dawned on me as I was putting this all in here that I think this gauge bezel with the Zada Tech gauges install is treating me a little bit nicer because I'm going to this Dakota Digital Dash. Now this is the only thing that I have to plug into that dash. I don't have my Speedo cable. I don't have my right hand connector or my left hand connector coming through here anymore. Those are all tucked in behind the dash and tied into my New Rad Solutions wiring harness that now shoots all the way over and in behind my glove box, where I've mounted the Dakota Digital or LMR reimagined dash, or the ECU, pardon me. So it's all tucked in behind the dash now, and I just couldn't help but think to myself, you know, now that the right hand connector is no longer hanging out in here and needing to be plugged into my OEM gauge cluster, and the left hand connector, which used to come through here, I don't have that problem anymore, right? So I've got all this real estate to tuck all this wiring in here, and it is a lot of wiring, at least for how many gauges and how many things that I'm going to be monitoring. So wanted to point that out to you before I go and install my gauge cluster here, because you're probably not going to get another chance to see all this stuff. And one more thing too is labeling is key. Okay, I've got labels everywhere, because the last thing you want to do is go and plug all this stuff in or go to test it and go, oh man, where is that wire, right? It's buried in behind the dash somewhere. So make sure you take your time, label everything. Final reveal, everything's in. Take a look at her from the cockpit here. Nice and subtle, right? Don't even really know anything's there until there you go. We got our dual AFR, or you can watch just left or just right. Water temp, intake temp, fuel pressure, oil pressure. Nice and subtle, just the way I like it. Now, final thoughts. I'm going to show you some things here, folks. So again, this bezel's out of an 87 through 89, and this car is a 92. So if you're looking at this dash bezel from different angles, you can see we've got some gaps in here. Actually, it's maybe a little hard for you to see, but you'll have to take my word for it that from various angles, the dash bezels down in this region do change in depth. From 90 to 93, they get a little wider, and that's why you can see a little bit more of the LMR dash in there. The same holds true for the other side. Yeah, you can almost even see here, right? We've got a bit of a gap. Now, if I didn't point that out, I don't know if anyone would even really notice. The same goes for this side. So you look at it from here, we're kind of good to go, right? But if you get right in here, you can see there's a gap. And with the bigger column, or the bigger column surround in the 90 through 93s, it kind of blocks a little bit of my inside gauge, like just, you know, an 1/8 of an inch. So those are kind of some things to keep in mind if you're going to be doing what I'm doing here, which is older bezel, newer model car, 90 to 93. So just a couple things to forewarn you about, but other than that, I am very, very happy. Really excited to monitor my AFRs. Another little thing I did while I was in here, and sorry folks, I was just kind of head down, arse up, is I've got a quarter horse in here now. So we're going to be doing some data logging coming up here to see if we can't hone in this tune a little bit and get rid of some of the finicky gremlins that are in it. But anyway, I think I'll leave this one here, folks. There's the install for you. One more word of warning is this is a lot of wiring, okay? For 3 little 1.3 inch screens. They are very, very cool, and you know, you can talk to Zada Tech and tell them to program your gauge up so you can monitor anything you want, like anything under the sun, they'll monitor. So yeah, and if you want to take the old idiot light route, here is how you can do it. So thanks so much for watching, ladies and gents. I'll catch you in the comments, and take care. Bye for now.